Okay, so we're on. All right, so last class we talked a lot about kind of the mturk platform for recruiting subjects. We talked about some kind of pitfalls or things to be a little bit weary of with recruiting subjects from that population, conducting studies, kind of using those folks. Today, I wanted to show you how to integrate mturk and qualtrics, and I've requested access for all of you for the CMU Tepper Qualtrics account. So depending on when you guys get access, I think an exercise that'll be useful to go through for one of our short writing assignments is just first setting up a requester account on mturk so that you can create your own studies. Log into Qualtrics and put together an incredibly simple kind of two-group study, and then using mturk for even a very small sample, recruit subjects, send them to Qualtrics, have them take your study, and then compensate them on mturk. In order to do this kind of the very first time, I think it would be amazing if you have your own study idea that you're interested in. I care more about giving you an incentive just to practice the setup for this procedure. So the actual study question and design itself is like immaterial for us. One thing you could totally do, which we're going to do for the practice session today, is just replicate an existing effect. But here it should be pretty simple and straightforward. So we'll give you kind of more details on that as we get your Qualtrics accesses sorted out, which I'm hoping is in the next day or two. Okay, let's introduce some of these pieces. So first thing, we can just Google search for mturk requester. And here, first thing I'm going to do is sign in as a requester on this site. So this is all through Amazon. So if you have an Amazon account already, your regular Amazon login will work. If you are very new to Qualtrics here, so you're going to need to create an account. So let's just show you where to do that. Create an account, fill out your email and password, and then sign in, or you can go through the process of creating an Amazon account too if you don't already have one. But I'm going to sign in as a requester. Okay, so this is kind of the landing page for when you first sign in. And this is a set of studies that I've run on mturk in the past. To show you what a typical setup looks like, I'm going to edit one of my existing projects. So here there are just really a couple pieces. So first, each of these projects, you want to give them a really general name. You don't want to kind of give away the focus of your study. So many of my studies have titles like decision-making study or educational experience survey or something like that. So here you just give your study a name, a title, description. So the title and description, I believe, are going to be visible to mturkers. And then optional, some mturk workers search using keywords, so it's helpful to put in like, study, experiment, research, short, I don't know, couple keywords to get found. Now, Here, you're going to choose how much you're going to compensate your subjects. So we talked a little bit last time about how the going wage rate is pretty low on mturk. I think I've had good luck in the past compensating people like 50 cents or $1 for a 10-minute study. So if you're putting together something really short, you can kind of work down from there a bit. It depends a little bit on how fast you want to recruit subjects. So here, I'm just going to ramp this up to, I don't know, 35 cents. We will need to pay Amazon some percentage as well. I think it's something like 20% of the amount that we're compensating the subject. So as you're thinking through how much you have to spend, kind of keep that piece in mind too. For our purposes, it's going to be fine to leave the sample size incredibly low. We'll talk later on in the course about kind of powering these studies, but I'm going to leave this thing at 20 for now. Importantly, this time allotted per worker is different from the time that you expect that the study will actually take. So the way that this works on the worker side is that they have some limited amount of time to complete your hit, and it's kind of bad for the subjects if they accept your task but can't finish in the allotted time. So here, often I'll ramp this up to something that's way more than I'm expecting the people will need to finish. So maybe, I don't know, 2 hours is fine. Survey expiration is fine too. Very important piece of this thing is after you have people take your study, the workers are going to care about whether you are reviewing and compensating them. So often I'll set an auto approval for a few days after just to be absolutely certain that my workers are getting their money, but I try to kind of check back and compensate people faster than this auto approval. The worker requirements, there are a couple options here. So I think people will set these filtering criteria a little bit differently. The kind of master's status has to do with how many hits a worker has completed. I am not sure how many you need in order to get that status. It's like 2,000 or something like that. So typically I'll set this to no because oftentimes I'm interested in kind of a more diverse sample rather than just these kind of professional mturkers. But one of the requirements I'll often incorporate is this approval rate greater than some threshold. I want to make sure that I'm getting people who are at least kind of abiding by the rules enough that I can expect to have reasonably good data. So setting this at 90 or 95, something like that, I think is typical. Depending on the question that you're interested in, you could additionally filter on other qualifications. Location in the United States could be one, depending on what you're interested in, but I think this is totally fine here. Then, okay, with the design layout, you have a couple options. So this study is sort of like the simplest possible format. So this one that I'm showing you is just a survey that lives just on mturk. We'll show you one that involves integration with qualtrics in just a second. But here you just have kind of, there's editable JavaScript. So it's pretty easy if you go to the preview. To see kind of how the JavaScript corresponds with what the participants are going to see. So on this particular study, I'm just asking how many years of schooling have you completed? Did you go to public school? Did you like school? And that's it. So just kind of in order to show an example of a really simple mturk hit. So after I finish with this setup, I'm kind of back to my launching screen, and if I'm feeling comfortable about the parameters I've set, I can go ahead and publish this study. Ooh, let's see. So I had asked for, I think, 20 participants, and I was going to compensate them at 30 cents each. So that's about, what is that? That's like maybe $7.50 or $8. So that doesn't seem too bad. So let's show you what it looks like, because it's kind of fun to have stuff running live. So you'll get to see what your how your hit presents. So they can see that I'm the requester, what the reward is, number of tasks available. This is the preview for what people see. That all looks good. So I'm going to say next. And then here, importantly, Amazon is going to kind of double check with me about the expected cost. I think you need to have money kind of pre-loaded on the site. We can show you where to do that in just a second, but $10 for this amazing illustration seems totally worth it. So I'm going to go ahead and publish. So that just mini survey about educational experience is now live. And so here we can kind of see live updates on how that thing is progressing. So we can kind of check back, see what people are saying. It'll be really exciting. Okay, so that's kind of the simplest setup on the mturk side. Let's show you one that's a little bit more complicated. So I'm going to go back to manage. Oh, let's see. Okay, so this decision-making study is an example of one that's integrated with mturk. So let's check that out. Or sorry, integrated with qualtrics. So here's the setup. This one's a little bit more involved. So I think it's often helpful for recruitment to give subjects an expectation of how long it'll take for them to finish. So I put that right in the title often. All right. With the design layout, here, let's show you the preview. So I think we talked about this a bit last time. So I give some information at the top about how long this thing will take, what the compensation will be like. This is kind of an optional piece. So in the design layout, you're going to see some JavaScript that is written so that the worker has to accept the hit in order to get access to the link. There, I want to prevent, this is done for kind of a complicated reason, but I want to prevent against a particular form of selection effect, where you can imagine that if I just give everybody access to the link before they decide whether to participate or not, they could go to the link and kind of work through the study, and then if they feel like they're getting bored, or they want to drop out, they don't necessarily have an incentive not to continue. Whereas if they accept the task and then they go to the study, it's less likely that I'm going to get participant dropout. And if for some reason my conditions aren't exactly balanced on kind of how difficult they are or how strenuous they feel, I could get kind of a weird selection effect that could bias my results. This piece, though, totally optional. I think it's more important as you're practicing just to kind of get the basic layout in there. Now, importantly, I also have this box for my workers to paste their completion code. So that's going to be something that's generated in Qualtrics, which we'll see in just a second. So the design layout, and here I'm going to copy and paste exactly this markup so that you can copy and paste into your mturk versions. Just make sure to change the appropriate pieces. Here, I think the relevant bits are just the link to the study. So I think it might appear in two places here. So we're going to go over to Qualtrics in just a second, but just so that you can see, you want to look for these links right here are going to be what you replace in your version. And then, really similar to the last one, once you've got this thing set up, the kind of finalization process, making it live, all of that is identical to the example that we just did previously. So this is kind of the setup on the mturk side. Questions about the mturk piece at all? Okay. So let's show you qualtrics. So I'm just going to search qualtrics. Yeah, qualtrics. Okay. So I'm going to log in. So importantly for you guys, the way this is going to work is there's a guy in Tepper, Matt Diabis. Not totally sure how to pronounce his last name. Matt will give you access to Qualtrics, and you'll get an email where you have 24 hours to set your password. So make sure to keep an eye out for that email and kind of log in to set this stuff up. I think the default is just your Andrew ID, and then I can't remember if typically it's at cmu.edu or at Andrew, but just kind of watch out for the directions there. So I'm going to log in. Okay, so this is the kind of landing page for Qualtrics. So I want to show you, let's start with a study that's more complicated than you will need to create. Ooh, actually, no. Let's start with the example QSSS one. Okay, so what you're going to see here is a sequence of what are called blocks. So each of these blocks, you can give a title, and you can kind of fold them here to keep track of what's going on. So what I did, this is an extremely simple study. So I wanted to replicate this kind of behavioral effect that's been shown in the past, where if you ask people to form probability judgments about events, it turns out that their report about judgments about groups of probabilities changes depending on whether you kind of unpack those probabilities. So as a specific example, you can ask people, like, what's the probability that you have some sort of like car repair in like needed in the next year. Okay, so imagine people answer that question versus you ask people, okay, so what's the probability that you need like engine repair, and what's the probability that you need other parts of cars that need repairs, the timing belts repair, et cetera, et cetera. So like you kind of list a few of these car repair types. It turns out that the total of these probabilities is likely to exceed the probability judgment they form about the class. So like giving people the subcategories is going to make this set super additive. Like they report a greater share for this group. So one thing that has been demonstrated in the past is you can compare. So in this study, no guarantee that this will work, but interesting to try. In one condition, I'm going to ask people about their judgment about the likelihood that any member of the Republican Party wins the 2020 US presidential election. And then also I'm going to ask them about the likelihood that any member of the Democratic Party wins. So that's kind of one condition. They form those judgments. And then in a separate condition, I'm first going to ask about the likelihood that any member of the Republican Party wins. But here I've unpacked the, so in case you're very out of the loop, Kamala Harris, Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, Beto O'Rourke. These are kind of like the leading contenders for the Democratic Party nomination for the 2020 election. So here I'm asking about the likelihoods of these high-profile people, and then I also say any member of the Democratic Party besides Harris, Sanders, Biden, or O'Rourke. So here, the expectation from kind of existing theory is that people who are in this second condition are going to report a greater total share for the Democratic victory relative to the first condition, just because we've kind of unpacked these probabilities. Yeah. The theory piece does not matter for us nearly as much as kind of the mechanics of how qualtrics is put together. But with these studies, a couple very common parts. So you're going to want a consent block, and here I'll make this available on Canvas as well. I use basically the same one for every single study. I think this is actually originally Alex Emus's consent form. So here, the procedures, kind of participant requirements, risks, benefits, like these are all pieces that are required for you to communicate as a part of the IRB consent. So at the bottom, we're going to just make sure that our participants are over 18, that they've read and understand the directions, and that they want to participate. Then usually have at least some kind of a very brief description of the study. So here we're going to give them kind of like a quick welcome note, clarify that they're going to be asked a few questions, and then we'll show them these questions here. In order to put this piece together, it's really easy to create blocks. So when you start your own new survey, I'll show you what that looks like. Create project. Okay. Let's say Asian disease replication. Okay, so here you've got choices about various block styles. So for the consent form, that's just a kind of a text that you can plop in. So here I would pick descriptive text and then just kind of copy and paste right in here, then we're good. If I want to add questions, typically I'll do that in a new block. So you can, let's see, add block. So here, maybe this is a multiple choice question. Let's see, with the Asian disease problem, here we can get the actual text in just a second, but okay. So here I'm just going to copy and paste the Asian disease problem. Okay. So here, I mean, we've got some flexibility on the presentation. Okay, imagine that the U.S. is preparing for the outbreak of an unusual Asian disease. which is expected to kill 600 people. 2 alternative programs to combat this disease have been proposed, so that the exact scientific estimates of the consequences of the program are as follows. We probably should have just kept this in the What's the prompt? Which of the 2 programs would you favor? Let's see. Here we go. Multiple answer. Oh. And then here I can ramp up the number of choices, option 2. There's a lot of flexibility on this thing in terms of forcing people to respond. If you have a kind of fill in the blank question, you can specify that you want different kinds of characters or a response in some particular range. Qualtrics has a lot more fancy bells and whistles too for like plopping in JavaScript that depends on other features. I think for us, just starting with kind of the absolute basics is totally fine. So here, I would then make a second block with the alternate presentation. And importantly, so here, in order to get a sense of how this stuff works, let's go back to the example QSSS study. So after you've got kind of the blocks for each of the presentations that you ultimately want to show, it's going to be important to manage the survey flow. So there are a couple of pieces in here that are kind of quirky. So first, as a part of the setup, we want to make sure that we can match people who complete our qualtrics study with people who join our study on mturk. And to do that, we need to generate random numbers to give people who finish the study. So the best way to do that is there's a way to add new elements. So at the bottom, you can click on Add a New Element. And then if I were creating this for the first time, I'd say Web Service. And then this is just kind of the URL, which I'll give you as well. So this is going to just go to this site, which just is a really simple script to generate a random number. And then I'm going to add query parameters, so make sure that the minimum is some value. I don't know, like 11111. The max is some value, 99999, whatever. And then, oh, sorry, this should be here we go, max set to 99999. Let me kill that piece. Okay. Now, that will generate the random value, and then the second piece that we need to do in order to call that value later is to set embedded data. So as you're specifying here as well, you can just click Add Embedded Data, and then this piece you just call random, and you can give it whatever name you want, like mturk validation. And then you can move this block up in your survey flow to stick it at the top. So this now just matches the thing that I have. I'm going to delete that. So this then ends up getting called at the very end of my survey. So here, I'll show you how to do this. So I'm going to make an end of survey message. going to say customize. Here, let's just delete the one that I have. Okay, so customize, override survey options, custom. Let's see, is there a way I can see it? New message. Okay, so here I can say, thank you for participating in the survey. Your mturk validation code is, and then now there's syntax for adding embedded data. So it's something like, let's see if we can just do this with point and click. Oh. E colon. Here we go. I think this is what it is. It's something like E colon / / field / and then the name of it. We can double check that this is right, but you can. And then whatever we name this thing. What would we call it? Like mturk validation, something like that. Okay. So then that'll plop in this random value that was selected initially. Okay, kind of the last piece really for setting these things up is these randomizer blocks are useful for determining the condition that your participants get. So there are a couple of different ways to do this, but I think the easiest is you can set an embedded data field for each of your conditions. So in the simplest kind of study, there are just two conditions here. So if you add this randomizer and then set the embedded data, these are just fields that you can name. So I give this whatever name I'd like. And then the randomizer is going to pick one or the other of these two embedded data fields to generate for each participant, which effectively down here is going to determine which of their conditions they get. So these branching nodes are going to depend on the value that condition is set to. Importantly, I want to show everyone my consent and welcome block. So I need to make sure that everybody gets those, and then this branching occurs kind of farther on when I'm ready to kind of randomize into condition. So before I save those, so all right, so now that we've got the kind of bones of the study set up, previewing and working through this thing is always a good idea. I think there are always bugs, especially the first time you're doing this thing. But here you can actually get a copy of the study to check to make sure that if someone doesn't fill out the the right answers, you're getting kind of the responses that you're expecting. Okay, so welcome to today's study. We'll pay you 20 cents. Next few pages, we'd like you to answer some questions. Okay, so now here I could put in my values, etc. 2, 5, whatever. So one thing to check on is some of these kind of boundary conditions. So you want to make sure. So here, importantly, I know that if someone kind of skipped some of those boxes, then they're still going to be given a validation code. And if I want to force a response, I can go back and edit that. Okay, but generally this thing looks pretty good. So if I were doing this for keeps, I would read through this thing much more carefully, do a bunch more rounds of kind of practice flow, but I don't want to subject you guys to all that. When you are ready to publish, you can hit publish. And then, say publish. Okay, so now this link is totally functional. So if I, as someone kind of unrelated to the study, went to this site, I have access to the study that'll start to take me through, right? So that URL is the one, if I'm going back and adjusting my mturk, I'm going to go to this design layout and replace those two values. Just save that. Importantly, I'd want to adjust the description to match what the study is about. So participate in a quick survey about politics. You'll make a few judgments about the likelihoods that various candidates are elected to the presidency, elected president in 2020. This is, I think, probably more descriptive than I would usually give, but survey takes about 2 minutes. We've set the expiration time to, I don't know, whatever the expiration time is, 2 hours, so you don't have to rush. You'll be compensated. Yeah. What was it? Anybody remember what it said in the?
I think it was 20.
Is it 20 cents? Okay, so preview and finish. Okay, so here, this looks pretty good. I think I would want to change the title. So this is politics survey. One, two, three, four, five.
Mark, is there a reason why you want to say things like after?
Yeah, I think some of this stuff is more. I think ultimately this stuff comes back to demand effects, and the story, the story about the worry gets to be really tenuous. But I think it's basically like you want to avoid circumstances where the way that you're recruiting somehow distorts people's likelihood of participation. So, like, one potential drawback with telling people exactly what the questions are, it's possible that I'm inadvertently recruiting subjects who are have kind of stronger, like better calibrated judgments about these likelihoods. And if I'm unwittingly in a domain where I'm recruiting people who are more expert than they are, they may be less likely to demonstrate the effect that I'm interested in, or something like that. The other piece, I think you want to try to avoid any kind of claim that people could guess what your hypothesis is. So definitely say for like the Asian disease problem replication, you wouldn't want to say something like, we're interested in whether you're sensitive to framing effects. You know what I mean? That would be really bad. But I think the simplest way around it is to give kind of nondescript descriptions. So maybe less than 3 minutes, something. 20 cents. Oh, I think we kind of skipped over this last time, but the number of assignments, let's see. So this is the piece where I think you set the total number of participants. So let's do just 5 just to check. Okay. So these are the filtering criteria I had from the previous study. Save. The one thing that for this study, you'll be exposed to stimuli and record your judgments. Okay, yeah, this is nondescript enough. Confidentiality. I just wanted to double check to make sure that the description on the landing page was accurate. Okay. Politics survey 5. I think this stuff seems pretty good. It's always a little bit frightening before you go live because there's real money on the line. I think often when I'm doing this stuff too, I'll first keep the number of hits really low, just so that if there's some crazy problem, I'm not paying 50 people to have done a problematic survey. But okay, I'm going to say save and preview and finish. Okay, should be cool. I always get nervous. We didn't say 30 cents anywhere, right? Did we say 30 cents? Okay. So I guess this is still called kind of decision-making study, which is fine. Okay, so I'm going to say publish batch. This looks fine.
Did you want to check the survey? Because I'm not sure if it was 20 cents.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I think it's 20 cents, but I don't want to ruin your reviews.
No, yeah, see, like these are the stakes. Like you gotta Okay, so it says 20 cents there. And then we're doing 20 cents here, and then in the survey itself. Did we tell them it would be something different potentially in the survey?
You said something in like the end of survey message about.
Oh, I think you might be right. Let's see. So it's 20 cents there. Okay. think it's okay. All right. It's okay. It's just 5 subjects. If they get mad, whatever. All right. So let's publish this thing. All right. So now this thing is also live. While that's going, let's just go back to the requester account. So the survey, let's see if that thing finished. Manage. Oh no. Okay, yeah, this is way less exciting than I thought it was going to be. So part of this thing too. Oh wow, never mind. So we've got 13 respondents. So should we check out what people told us?
Yeah.
So these questions were not that exciting. This is just like. Yeah. All right. So this is a super important thing too. So these are really questions. So we just asked like, did you go to public school? Everybody went to public school. So how many years of education have you completed? So you've got I'd say this is pretty typical for what you would expect. You know, kind of a mix of folks. Like, did you like school? Now, people like. When you are conducting real studies, unless you force response types, it's gonna be a mess. It's like it's the internet out there, you know. So like a lot of people, you know, like thinking about. So here's something too. So let's say I grab the data here. So I can just say download the CSV of the results. Whatever. Click here. So importantly, why, I mean, this is a tiny thing, but like, why, so keep in mind that even for like a very simple yes, no question, if I'm not careful about how I ask, I'm building myself more work in the future, right? Because let's say this is a question I actually care about, and so I need to ramp up my sample size to like 300 subjects or something. At least right now, I'm going to have to go in and let's say I want just a simple 1 or 0 if it's a yes or a no. For some of these, it's tricky to figure out like somewhat, you know, no for junior high school, yes for elementary school and college. Like I need to decide what to do with something like that. Another piece of this is like, in something like R or Python, it's easy to ask, like, does the response exactly match some character string? And depending on the program, that might be case sensitive. So I know I'm going to need to convert all of this stuff to lower case first. And then I'm going to have to like look through and figure out like, what about the people who say like, yes, hyphen, definitely, or something like that. Like that, this character string doesn't exactly match yes. So I would potentially need to go back and hand code something like that. Another way to do it potentially would be, you know, somebody had written yes, definitely. If you wrote a script that asked whether the word yes appeared or the word no appeared, something like this is going to get really complicated, right? Like this response has a yes and a no. So the point is, even for incredibly simple questions, if you're doing this thing for real, and I probably should have modeled better behavior here, but like this is in part why Qualtrics is better than just hosting your study on mturk. It's better, I think, to force the responses unless you're asking for an open end. And then in cases where you kind of don't have a, like if you have limited control over how people express themselves, giving them examples of how you want answers formatted can be helpful as well. But this thing is kind of fun. We don't get that much variation in terms of public school, which is not that exciting. But good to see that people on average are liking school. Okay. Last thing. So let's check out the, let's see, manage. I guess it takes some time for people to work through the slightly longer study. Importantly, if your study is hosted on Qualtrics, let's go back to Qualtrics. Projects. Let's see. Is that this one?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Yeah. So some of this could be my data from going through and checking. I'm not sure. So let's check this out. So data and analysis. Okay, export. I think this is right. It's been a while since I've done this. It's done with the CSV. So this thing should, goodness. All right, so all of these were the preview responses, right? So these were just me. It is important to, so there are some pieces that you can do to save yourself work later on as well. So here, the output that we're seeing depends on how the questions are labeled within mturk. So if I were going back to analyze this thing, it's a little annoying. I mean, I guess this is nice that I've got the, any member of the Republican, any member of the Democrat, and then these are the pieces for the other parties. So I guess this one isn't too bad. So I can probably just delete this row. But here, the way that this is going to work as people kind of start working on this thing is either they're going to have data in this first field, or they should have a set over here. We get information about their condition, and then importantly, super importantly, this is the mturk validation code that's generated at the end, so that on mturk, I can go back to link and double check. Typically, the way I usually do things is just like crediting everybody who submits. It's a little bit of a pain to double check the files, but I mean, if you're paying participants a fair amount of money, could be a reason to do that. Couple other important pieces. So this thing is pretty crazy. Anybody know what those numbers are? Those are latitude and longitude coordinates, roughly, of the IP address that completed this study. So you could like go to an latitude longitude plotting tool and look up and find out like roughly kind of what the area is that someone is in. This is the kind of thing that's sensitive information that we promise the students that will, the subjects that will delete. So you should, unless, I mean, I don't know. Definitely do not want to violate IRB protocols. So, delete those things. And then I think we also tell people that we delete I don't think there's any other individually identifying information in here. We'll chat about this more once you guys actually get Qualtrics access, but I'm hoping that as you're picking studies to potentially replicate or questions to ask yourselves, I just want to double check to make sure you're not asking about anything that's like wildly outrageous. So I think the process is gonna be, I'll ask you to let me know briefly in class, like what the question is that you're gonna ask. But all of this stuff, I wanna make sure we wait until we get you guys Qualtrics access. But this is basically the setup. I think even for an extremely simple study, you can kind of start to see how there's gonna be some annoying data cleaning that goes in here in order to start to get an answer to our question. Because what's happening, like the focal question that we're actually interested in is whether the sum across these values on average is higher than this value, the value in this column, I think. So this is, I mean, I guess maybe that's not too bad. But I kind of having some sense of what kind of data is going to come out of this thing will help you do a good job of programming the study in the first place. Questions about the setup at all? I think this stuff is pretty straightforward. There are a lot of kind of small, annoying steps. There are a number of good demonstrations of linking Qualtrics and mturk online. I have been trying to record the screen here. So